And the book, Old Document, Wild as They Come, the author is Kent Brooks. He has pretty well documented that in the late 1800s, when people came out here, and you are very familiar with the rock house, rock dwelling there in front of Crack Cave, aren't you? We've ridden by it many times.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that was erected in the late 1800s by some people that settled there. They were actually trapping and was kind of horse traders, horse guys. That's why the big, nice rock kraals that you can see the ruins of, that's why they're there. They homesteaded or settled there, and of course, that's kind of at the headwaters of several water sources. Well, the Prairie Cattle Company had laid claim, not legal claim, but they just said, we have it, we're going to run cattle on it, and they did. And when guys like this homesteader settled there, they had control of the water. So the Prairie Cattle Company and the several other those big out of state, actually, they were British and English companies. They come in, had a lot of cattle. I think the Jay Cattle Company, the Holly Cattle Company, and the Prairie Cattle Company running lots of cattle. Had a little problem with these guys there at the water because they couldn't get access to it. So they hired Bill Big Thompson. He was a regulator, they called him, and he come around, and if you didn't leave, which a lot of them didn't, he simply terminated you, shot you, and you were dead. That's the lead-in story. Get that article, and you can see it. That's on the front page. And then right below that is Muddied Water, McKinley's Contempt, and the Colorado Groundwater Commission. And that's the reprint of the article in the Fence Post magazine. Very nice article. Goes into some pretty interesting stuff there. See, the Colorado law and Constitution guarantees any citizen rights to the courts. You may not be correct, you may make a fool out of yourself, but you have a right to address the court. Colorado law says that anyone who objects to an appropriation granted by the Colorado Commission shall submit that objection. Upon receipt of that objection, the Colorado Groundwater Commission shall, not will or may, but they shall schedule a hearing. At that hearing, the Groundwater Commission must prove there is unappropriated water available. If it's not available, no permit. If it's available, permit granted. And then, of course, beyond that, you can appeal that decision, whatever it is. But see, in this case, we have never got to the hearing.
There was no hearing given.
You turned that.
Say that again, Matt. You were kind of chopping out there.
So you filed objections to all these wells, and no public hearing was ever given, just denied the objection.
That's correct. And the reason that they say is that I have not proven material damage. I have not had a high capacity well. Now the rules, and we're not talking law, we're talking rules promulgated by the Groundwater Commission, says that anyone within 600 feet of this proposed objection with a high capacity well. Now there's two types of well, several types, but we're dealing here with basically two types. And it's agricultural water. And of course, agricultural is domestic and irrigation, both of that. And domestic by Constitution, Article 16, Chapter 16, Article 5 and 6, says domestic water has a vested right. So if our place, as you grew up here taking a bath, that water, you had a right to that water through living here and being on by Colorado law. But the rules say that only a high capacity well. And also the rules do say at one point that if there's a conflict between rules and law, the law prevails. So the law says that any person, now that gets confused because some people say, well, citizens of age, residents, inhabitants, none of that makes any difference. The law simply says a person. So if you're a person, then you have a right to object. And upon that object, anybody out of state, you, Nevada, anywhere, then you object, and there shall be a hearing. At that hearing, the commission proves unappropriated water available. Now, appropriated water available, that gets a little bit technical because there's a definition for how much water is around this well. And that definition is a mechanical or mathematical formula that says a 3-mile radius to the depth that creates a cylinder. And within that, you calculate how much water. It's all well defined. It involves specific gravity, the porosity, the recharge, the yield. Those factors go into it. Then you calculate the amount of water. And you are allowed for that well 40% of the amount of water in that aquifer extended over a 100-year period of time. So if you've got this well, you go through the process, and if the engineering is done according to law, then you've got 100 years to get 40%. If you get 20% in 5 years, you better look at your whole card, because then you only got another 5 years for the rest of your water. So that's well defined, and that's all I want. And that's what this whole argument's about. People go into the fact that what are they going to use the water for? What is the yield, the specific usage, how much, all of those factors, what are they going to grow? None of that makes any difference at this point, because the law simply says you have a right to object and they must prove. So that's the whole crux of this thing. That's what got me charged with 90 days in jail. And that charge, the judge did grant that injunction, and I did file an appeal. My appeal simply says, what do you mean by this? Because I had cases that I appealed to in the past, and they were appealed to before the injunction. The injunction now came down in April. I think it was signed April the 6th, and it says I cannot object nor appeal any more water stuff without the representation of a Colorado licensed attorney or all of these factors that I must prove. And that showed all the cases I've been involved in, and the status of them, the fees, all of that. That was all legal stuff, just had nothing to do with water. Just stuff to put up so that I could not object, because here's the bottom line. The water's not there. And there is huge bucks. And our water commissioner from this area, as you know, is your relative. I guess it's your fault, Max. You are related to this guy, Blake Gorley, your relative. And he's a commissioner, and he's making millions off of these water permits, and he's selling property. He sold property for $3,000 an acre. That property, sorry, land east of Two Buttes. Never rains up there. It's actually on the market for $300 to $500 an acre. He sold it for $3 million, and he's involved in it. And all of that goes back to these water permits. So I guess you're going to have to share some of the blame there, Matt, because you're related to him.
I suppose so. So where are we going from here?
Well, from here, I have contacted my attorney, and I can't afford one, of course, but I have a court-appointed attorney, and he agreed to stay with me after that. He's paid by the state through the contempt trial, and we got through the contempt trial. So he is paid with the state, and that's over. Now I'm meeting with him on Tuesday, and we are going to write an appeal. See, the judge's injunction said I can't appeal. Now, the law says anyone can appeal. So right there, that is a conflict. And we have to decide, and it's not just this case. We are now at the point that all America, if you're an American citizen, don't make no difference whether you vote or not or what you are, but are we going to allow legislation from the bench, legislation from the governor? A little sidebar here. In Michigan, the Supreme Court has determined that the governor's mandates, as far as wearing masks, closing businesses, all of those, the governor's mandates are null and void. She has no right to do that. Only the legislature of a state has the right to make laws. Now, they can make all the laws they want, and it's up to the governor. The governor solely has the responsibility of saying yes or no. He can veto any law or not, and he don't have to veto it. He can refuse to sign anything. As you know, I was a lawmaker for 8 years and term limited out, and we made laws. I made several of them that the governor refused to sign, but some of them he did. And that is his sole power. Whenever our governor, Polis, and he's up for recall. Anybody wants to sign a recall election or a petition, please do so. He is up for recall. He said a little restaurant there in Castle Rock opened up on Mother's Day, and he said they're violating the law. There is no law that says a restaurant must close. There is no law that says you have to wear a mask. It can be a suggestion, a recommendation, an encouragement, and a policy, but not a law. You cannot be charged by state law. And when you start doing it, then I am advocating you do away with the legislature. You know, they spent millions. I didn't get much of it, a little, but they spent millions sending guys like me to the Capitol to make laws. And if we're not going to make laws, we're going to let the governor make his own laws. Wasted money. So tell all your people, wake up, start looking at this, have an interest. Now back to water. There is one thing existing on Earth that is most essential to the survival of the human species. Of course, that's water. Air, of course, but it's kind of hard to regulate air. I'm sure there'll be some genius minds figure it out someday, but it's hard right now. But water, and as we see in Colorado, as this case exhibits, water is very easily regulated and controlled. And without water, you only got 3 days to live. Now, they all come back. The attorneys have said you haven't proved any material damage. Well, no, I haven't. As long as you can take a bath and get a drink of water, you're okay. But when that's over, you only got 3 days, and you're not going to feel like doing a whole lot for those 3 days without water, then you're going to die. This is very, very important.
Absolutely. The material damage comes when it's too late and there's no remedy at that point.
Exactly. Let me know if anybody knows of a murder victim that ever testified at his trial. I was materially damaged.
Yeah. There's no. It's too late at that point.
Exactly. It don't happen. And there's the legislature even. I'm getting a lot of legislative support. You probably know Senator Pete Lee and Don Corm, a lot of those people. And they are kind of concerned, and the law's there, but it's not being followed. What are we going to do? I suggested that if the law is there and it's not being followed, the person that violates it is charged with theft. The state engineer is actually stealing our water. Constitution rights, Blake Gorley stealing the water. We have a right, and they are illegally. What I'm going now, and I think I was a little vague when you asked that, I'm filing an injunction or an appeal to remove the injunction. Now, I'm really not interested in appealing any more water appropriations. I've done that, and 40 permits, been at 40 times. It's been time consuming. Hasn't cost any money, because I've done it all myself. But I was sued for 40,000 attorney fees on one application alone. So take that 40,000 times 40, and you get some over $1 million just on one alone. So I finally got it down. They looked at it. We went to court. I appealed. They reviewed it, and I owe $288.16. The courts finally, and I'm trying to figure out how to pay that. $288.16 I owe on a $40,000 attorney fees. That's your relative, you, Matt, your relative, that filed the complaint, and his sweet smelling little lawyer, Alan Curtis, he said, "You owe us 40,000." I said, "Piss on you, come and get it." And they filed the papers, and we went to court. But I owe $288.16, and I'm thinking, well, see, now I've been opposed by 5 attorney general. Our very own state of Colorado, you, the taxpayer, is paying for 5 attorney generals to oppose me. Over $1 million worth of attorney fees you're paying. Also, Alan Curtis and the sweet smelling little boys on the 16th Street Mall. They're 40,000 on one case, and this same little lawyer has handled nearly all of the other cases. So he's probably into it for like over $1 million. If we're going to allow this to happen, and that's how they get by with it, is that they run your fees up and you finally go. So I'm trying to decide how to split this $288.16 up. Should I figure out the number of lawyers, which at least there's 10 or 12 lawyers. That's $28 a piece for each one of them. And also, then I need to deduct postage because you got to notify everybody. If I do anything, I have to notify the attorney general's little sweet smelling boys and Alan Curtis's little boys. I have to notify all of them. And so now I owe all these lawyers $28. Well, of course, I can't pay it because I don't have anything. And with my horse wrecks in the last couple of years, I'm not in that great a shape. Nobody wants to hire a beat up cowboy and help him get on his horse to do day work anymore. They expect you to get on and off by yourself. So I'm going to have to prorate this out. So I'm trying to figure the mathematics. It's getting a little complicated. I can figure the volume of a cylinder, and I can figure the appropriation amount that we should be given. But the hard part is figuring out how much to send these sweet smelling little boys, because I got postage fees I got to figure out. So it's getting to be a rather complicated formula. And I know you've got some pretty good math abilities, so help me out a little if you can.
I will. Well, if anybody, we've got a few people watching right now. If you'd like to donate to the cause for my dad's legal fees, you can Venmo me at Light. We'll see if we can't get
Well, now,
some.
wait a minute.
That'll
Wait a
be.
minute. I really don't have any legal fees because I've done all of this myself. It's them other folks that's got the legal fees, and we ain't paying them a dime above this $288.16 so far. But I could go out and, there's some old pickups out here. It might be your car. I might have to sell your car that you've got parked out here to pay the $288.
I'll use
so
as
far,
a tax write-off.
Don't worry about it. But, dude.
Well, what anything we raise over, put it towards your future legal fees.
But you do whatever you want, but I'm really fine. The most important thing, the thing we can do, and so often we fall into this trap. We think, you hear a story like this and you think, oh man, that's too bad. I'm sending $100 and you feel good. That really don't pay the bill. What does pay the bill is for you to wake up and say, we are a country with life, liberty, and property protected by the government, and life and justice for all. And if we don't stand up and do our duty, you can't buy your way out. You can only work your way out of it and make sure that we're a country with our voice heard by the government.
Absolutely. That's the thing is you can feel good sharing a post, you can feel good sending some money, but if you don't ever actually stand up, if you still go ahead and put the mask on and refuse to open your business because the government, the governor, it's just all hollow.
You're right. It's pretty hollow, and you got to do it. You can't buy your way out.
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, how's everything going down in that part of the world? Is pretty dry, I imagine.
Well, yeah, but it's not getting any drier. It's about the only place it can go, and we're just fine. This is a desert. It's always been dry, and sometimes it's drier than others. And actually, right now, this is perfect weather for what we're doing, because this shows what a desert this is. This shows how important. Now, just last week, Alan Pendergraft, who's a writer for the Westward, and he's kind of independent, sells articles wherever. He came down, and a friend of mine from over Pritchett, she came over. We toured along the Santa Fe Trail down here on the Cimarron River. You've been across that many times, helped me gather cattle there.
Oh yeah.
And driving along that Cimarron River, we're on public land, Cimarron National Grassland. It says Comanche on the Colorado side, it's Cimarron on Kansas. And there's a 15, 16-mile stretch across there, 4 or 5 miles deep, that we gather cattle off of. And it only exists because there's water available for the livestock through the stock wells, little windmills, some of them 30, 40, 50 feet deep, that pump water for the cattle. And cattle, in order to exist, as you well know, is this time of the year, 20, 30 gallons a day, which is more than adequately supplied by a simple windmill. You know, Matt, along those windmills that we used to pass gathering cattle, we'd find the cattle gathered up and everywhere. Some of them are stacked out. The pipe stacked out. By that I mean the pipe, the sucker rods are pulled out and standing in the tower, and there's a hydrant where they have piped water from other wells, because a windmill will supply more than what the rangeland will supply. So there's actually a little excess left over, but they are piping that water across. And of course, if one well goes dry, that's the ones closest to the river where the aquifer has started dropping. And as you get further out, you still got a little water, and that's what's been tight, but that'll soon be gone. And when that's gone, then that land has no more value. Nothing you can do with land that has no water on it. Look at it, take pictures, I guess, if you like pictures of blowing sand and sagebrush, but that's about it. And that has the tracks of the Santa Fe Trail. And the reason the Santa Fe Trail existed, that was the main trade route between New Mexico and Independence, Missouri. It lasted for some 70 years. The only reason that existed because there was water in that Cimarron River. Standing water, sometimes it was quite a distance between water holes, but it was there. And you're familiar between Keys and Boise City, there is Willabar Lake. And that's the name of that depression. You've been by it. I don't know if I've ever told you about this story, but that's a big bowl right there in the earth. And there was Willabar Lake. There was always water there. There was always wagons parked around it, homesteaders, Santa Fe Trail traders, and that hadn't had any water in it for years because the water level is dropping. And it's dropping because people are using it, and not for their livelihood, but their own selfish reasons for profit. Now, these appropriations that I have objected to are requests from out of state, big money. And one of them, we're pretty sure, goes to Russian investors. And they have come in and realized that they can buy that. Even the guy down on the river, the ranch owner, a couple of years ago when I first got started, One of my buddies told me, he said, we don't have to worry about that, old man, because we have our own water lawyers, they do, our own hydrologists, they do, and our own water engineer. Well, you can buy water hydrologists and water lawyers, a few million, buy you a dozen of them. But I was wondering about the water commissioner, but then I found out they have, and they do, they own a water commissioner. You're relative, Blake. Gorley, you're relative, man. Be sure and send Blake a copy of this podcast, will you? I'm sure he'd love it. We can show it at the family reunion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll make sure and do that. So, has there been any sort of push legislation?
I lost you for a minute. Push what, Matt?
Has there been policies or laws instituted at the legislative level, or?
Well, there have been a lot of interest, and they're asking me. But again, that does no difference. I've said, don't waste your money. They'll just laugh at you because the law is there. The law says anyone objects, there shall be a hearing. At that hearing, water available, okay. Water not, no. That's it. That's the only issue. And they keep, the Waitsmana little boys, they change the law. They will actually quote those laws differently than what they're written. They will say that law says if there's no material damage, then permit granted. That's not what it says. That law says if there's unappropriated water available. Two totally different subjects. So what good's more legislation going to do? And again, the legislators will look at that and they'll spend lots of time, no telling how many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars with the lawyers writing legislation, put it in the books. The Attorney General, Phil Wiesner, is our Attorney General. His number one assistant, Paul Bennington, and I quoted this law 3790-107, Chapter 4, if you want to look it up. I quoted him that law, and he said, you're right. That's what the law says. But understand that that's not something we're going to pay attention to. It has no meaning when we consider it because we're not coming down here, we're not holding a hearing, and we don't have to obey that law. So what good's another law doing? And I'm working with the legislatures, and that's what the appeal. I'm going to be working with the attorney on October the 20th, and that appeal will be to remove the injunction. Now that's it. Just remove the injunction. That means then I can object because that is simple. And I've discovered when working with lawyers, you need to keep it very, very simple. Removing that injunction against me objecting to wells, then of course the contempt goes away. I can keep on objecting, which I'm really not interested in doing. Other people are, and it will be a step forward. I really want to file a lawsuit, and here's where I can use some help. If anyone, any of your people or who is interested, and I'm talking to DU School of Law there in Aurora or Littleton, Colorado, Denver, South Denver. I'm talking to them, or actually Don Coram, Senator Coram's talking to him. We want to file a lawsuit that says every one of these wells, which we can only go back 3 years, which would include all 40 of my objections. Every one of those objections, if that appropriation has been granted without a hearing, is an illegal appropriation. And all of those permits will be revoked until there is a hearing as prescribed by law, in which the state engineer must prove unappropriated water available. If he can prove that at the hearing, then that permit by law can be granted. And of course, beyond that, then you can appeal. There's legal steps beyond that, but they get a little more complicated. We need to go to the person, just like a speeding ticket. You can't get a speeding ticket, you don't have to pay a speeding ticket. If a cop don't stop you, or you go through now, it's electronically. If you go through that, but you've got to do that action, and they have to prove that you was speeding. And if they can't prove that, if they just said, well, we know he was speeding because he went from Springfield to Walsh in 10 minutes when it should take 20. So he had to be speeding. That's not going to get you a ticket, only when they prove you did it. So it's the very same thing. It's simple here, and the law is simple. It's straight. It's not hard to understand. So let's get together. Anybody wants to help? Appreciate it. Let's put us together a lawsuit. Get in touch with me. Get in touch with Matt, and we will work together, and we will put together a lawsuit. And that lawsuit, if successful, and it'll sure tie up a lot of stuff for a long time, will protect our water. But it's up to us to do it.
All right. How can they get a hold of you?
Well, call me. And that's kind of mission impossible. I was on the phone with you and it quit a while ago. My number is 719-523-3091. My email, wesmckinley@gmail.com. And let's see, what else? Oh, my address, 9635 County Road 44, Walsh, WALSH, Colorado, 81090.
All right. Well, you can also shoot me a message over here at Burning Daylight. We'll get you in touch. Yeah, it's a big issue that not a lot of people are talking about, but it's got big consequences in the future. And if we don't speak up, don't exercise our rights, they just go away.
Exactly. And look at that Plainsman Herald. Let me see. Can you see that? Let me go. I'll hold it up. I don't know if you can see that, but you've got the information. Plainsman Herald, Wednesday, September the 30th, 2020, volume 133, number 13. And you can see the headline, water, or the lack thereof, on the front page. And right below it is muddied water, McKinley's Contempt, and the Colorado Groundwater Commission. And that article came about from the Fence Post because whenever the trial was, September the 30th, I scheduled a picnic. You know how we like to do barbecues. And that is on the front cover of the Fence Post. Have you seen that?
I have.
Okay. And that's on the front cover.
I'll share that article on my page too.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's the same one in the Plainsman Herald, but that article's there. And really pissed the judge off, I think, because he came prepared to put me in jail. They had the warrant. And, of course, I wasn't going to be there very long. I had people lined up, and they said, don't worry, we're going to bail you out and all that. I said, don't worry, I could use a little time in jail, practice my guitar playing. I'm trying to get better. I'd like to study a little more law, learn a little more about computers, like to read, and maybe get a little bit of health care. I got bad knees. If I happen to stumble when I'm thrown to jail, maybe the state would fix them for me. So I really don't mind. I'm kind of looking forward, of course, live alone. 3 meals a day would be served a day. Now I only cook about one by myself. So that wasn't a big concern, but I thought this would be a lot of fun. And I wanted to protect my family, too, because they was all interested. Tony and, of course, Bobby Joe, and I have a friend over Pritchett, and Big Mike Serbo, Ron Stewart, Dan Caldwell, a lot of my buddies interested. So I said, we'll just have a picnic. And that kept them out of the restaurant and exposure to COVID. So we cooked hamburgers on my grill out in the parking lot there at the courthouse. Beautiful day. And then Billy showed up, Cowboy Billy, the guitar player, and he had his loudspeaker system with him. We set that up. So everybody in the courtroom laid out on the grass. It was a beautiful day, and hooped and hollered and heard the whole thing from outside on the grass. Now, I know you had mentioned that you was going to put that on your broadcast app, because I think you heard it, didn't you?
Yeah, I tuned in to it. I shared the link and everything too. So there was a handful of people that were from all over the country that tuned in just to listen.
Oh, great, great. Well, Tamara tuned in, and start with the judge was asking, whenever he would get that bang at someone on who are you, and it was Tamara. She was calling from her place, and Billy Whitfield, of course, he was calling from the parking lot of the courthouse because he had the loudspeaker system hooked up, and him and Brother Jim were the technicians on getting that broadcasted, and Kelly O. I don't know if you ever met Kelly O. Kelly Orange, my cute little aide that worked there at the Capitol for me. That was so much fun. She's a lawyer down in New Orleans.
Oh yeah.
And you remember Kelly? She was the one that did the dancing outside whenever we played the guitars in the second floor. Her and a couple of buddies would come out and perform for us. And Topania. Well, she's a lawyer, kind of one of those public interest lawyers. Really good girl. And she was in New Orleans, and she dialed in. And her parents, I was good friends with her parents. They heard the whole thing. So the judge, when he saw all that, that was making him a little nervous. He didn't know what to do about it, of course. He thought I was just going to show up like they always do at a contempt of court. And I did say that I had to be there on purpose. I'd petitioned because this was all going to be on the internet, on the video. And I said, no, I can't hear. I can't walk. And I'm a little bit feeble and can't see, not very quick-minded. So I had to be in person. And my lawyer, he filed that, the court appointed, and he said that I had to be there in person because of my infirmities as a consequences of having so much experience and living so long. Then I was in the courtroom and he was there. And the judge, I had several people in. There's a lot of people come in the courtroom, and the judge come in. He wasn't real happy. He said only 10 people in the courtroom. And there was some people started kind of groaning objection. And he said, it's not my rule, it's a chief justice's. And he got up and left. So then it was up to me to designate the 10 people that stayed. But you know what I think of Judge Brinkley anyway. He was one of my students. I told him years ago when he was one of my students that he needed to get into law because he always tried to argue a math theorem or theory with me. And I said, you're not winning any arguments in math. You need to take another area. So he went into law. Maybe he can win one. And I think he lost a few there. He's not very good in that area either.
Well, it was very entertaining for what should have been a very dry court hearing. It was pretty entertaining. I had planned on live streaming it on the page, and a disclaimer that said you cannot redistribute under penalty of law. So I didn't have time to look that up before it started. So I chose not to, but I shared the link. And so there, you had somebody from West Virginia, you had somebody from Vermont, and Oklahoma, a couple different people that tuned in on that. And
well, it's really a pretty big issue. Should be in Oklahoma.
We'll have.
Go ahead.
I would say, and then just this now, we've got 9 people watching on Facebook. I don't know how many we've got on YouTube, but there'll be people who hear this, and I'm sure that this is one that'll get shared around a little bit. So it'll become a pretty big issue before you know it.
Well, it is, and we talk so much about healthcare and all of the different other legal things, but we're kind of ignoring water, and we're letting that get into control of big money. Just like the 40 permits right here. That's only in Baker County. That's out of state. That's not little farmers, me and you, wanting an irrigation well to irrigate enough feed to feed our cattle. That's not what it is. This is multimillionaires, billionaires, and they're wanting control of what is the most important substance. You know how important your prescription drugs are. People sacrifice and deny themselves some of the essentials just to keep up their med bills. Think about what water is in comparison to the med bills. The med bills become nothing when you think about the requirement, the need, the necessity for water. Some of my friends out listening to the court case got a little nervous when I started cross-examining the judge. You know, he backed up there because he said he didn't recall that I turned around and called him on it. You didn't see it, but I actually swiveled around in my chair when I said, now, Judge Brinkley, on this day and this happened, and you said, and he said, okay, I remember that. They thought I might have stretched the limit, but if it was the truth, I didn't care, because you can't stretch the truth till it breaks. It stays intact.
Well, could they have called you and could they have like done a double contempt of court on that?
Yeah, they could have. Sure, they could have. And I knew that.
That deal.
And I didn't care, but I'd talked to the sheriff, and I'd done some research. The sheriff is actually the one that would have put me in jail, and he could have decided how to do that. You know, he could have actually put me in jail. He could have put a monitoring bracelet on me, told me I couldn't leave the property or the county, whatever. There was several options, and I was pretty sure he wasn't going to put me into jail, and I really didn't care. And when that sweet-smelling little fellow started reading off my qualifications, you remember that? He said, Mr. McKinley.
Oh, yeah.
You say you're just a cowboy. I said, I am. Well, he went through the writing the book, the grand juries, and my political career. I didn't say nothing, but I thought about telling him, you sweet-smelling little fella, you're making $350 an hour for this, and I'm better qualified than you are. And I didn't say that for no purpose, but I was feeling pretty good after he read them off, because I think I'm better qualified legally to do that than he is. And he was making $350. They talked about the attorney fees. He made probably, what was it, 3 hours? He made $1,050 on that one deal that afternoon, probably another 2,000 or 3,000 in preparation time. And that's where they get you. Because they told me from the beginning, do you have an attorney? You have to get one. And I didn't. I kept on doing that. I did all of that filings, all that legal stuff myself. Then in deposition, I have it. It's on court record. He has said, if you don't drop your appeals, we're coming after you. And I told him, bring it on. Come on, make sure you get the address right. And he's used that in some other files. And I said, exactly right. That's the standard response. If you want a threat, let's make it a reality. See who wins.
Yeah. Yeah. And boy, he was not at all a fan of yours. You could tell even over the video conference. You could tell.
Even on that, you could tell he wasn't a fan. I know. The first time I seen him, I thought, this guy has got the prettiest hair. He had the most beautiful blonde hair you ever saw. And then I realized it was a wig. And I've been wanting to get close to him in public and pull that off. I think I've tried to think, how can I do this? But he don't wear it anymore. I haven't seen him in public with this wig. But and first time I seen him, I did a presentation at the Capitol, and this was on water. This was a few years ago. First time he seen me, he come up to me and wanted to shake my hand. Senator McKinley, I've been such impressed with your legislative service. I've been before your hearings. And I thought right then, little fella, if you can't get the title right.
No, you haven't.
You are way behind, because you need to get the title right. Yeah, I don't think he's going to send me any Christmas cards, and that's okay. But I would like to get a little close to him one of these days.
Yeah. We'll leave it at that for legal reasons.
I know.
Oh, man. Well, I think we can get enough traction from this where it brings some attention. I've told people about the Pinyon Canyon stuff quite a little bit, and
Right.
when we go back to the U.S. Constitution, which allows eminent domain.
Wait a minute.
They
Nope, no, Matt. Got to correct you on that. The U.S. Constitution does
Okay.
not allow eminent domain. Now, be careful with this. The U.S. Constitution says the government may purchase property with the consent of the legislature for courthouses, post offices, arsenals, mints, or other purposes. That's in the Constitution. So what that means, if when they put a courthouse in up at Walls, or a post office, or a hospital, government hospital, they had to go to the legislature and say, we want to purchase, not get, but we want to purchase land. And the legislature had to give the nod and say, okay, you can go buy it from whoever owns it. So they did. Well, that was pretty cumbersome because we wanted government buildings and we wanted post offices, all of those things. So then Colorado, and I'm sure every other state, I'm only familiar with Colorado, and you look at the Colorado law, it says we grant permission to acquire property in Colorado for courthouses, post offices, arsenals, mints, or other proper purposes by purchase, eminent domain, and condemnation. That was not a constitution, that's a state law. So I took that law. Pinyon Canyon had the right, they did it in 82, they had the right to acquire a lot of that property, 238,000 acres. They had a right to acquire that by eminent domain because the state gave them that right, not the Constitution. But then I changed the state law. You don't change the Constitution. I changed the state law and simply said we do not give permission to acquire private property for military training purposes by eminent domain. That's simple. That's what all the animals at the courthouse, and you were involved in that, and the guitar playing in the parking lot and all of those things was to change the state law that give the government right to acquire property for eminent domain. We did not take their right away totally. We just restricted it to say, because it was open-ended, they could acquire property. And we said, but not for training purposes by eminent domain. They can still buy it if they want to go buy a little property, but that gets too cumbersome. That's how they got to 238,000 acres. They bought some property, then they filled it in, which was like 75, 80% with eminent domain. So it's not the Constitution. You in America, all people, they do not have the right by Constitution for eminent domain. That was given by state law.
I see. I guess back to my original point I was going to make is that was all possible because you made a stink about it, to put it, simply, is you made a stink about the whole deal, and enough people heard, enough people got involved that push was able to be made to write that law.
Right. The people got interested.
That was the main part, is people got.
Mm-hmm. They got interested because they were affected, and they supported my law. It was a group effort. They supported me, saying, we're not going to let you take our property just so you can train. And we saw where they were going to train foreign troops on our property. And we're not going to allow that in Colorado. We're going to change the Colorado law. And that's what we do every day at the Capitol. Every day we're in session. Most of what we do is amend an existing law to fit a modern situation. So we amended this law that had been in place since the late 1900s, and went in real early. That we got tired. That's all we'd get done was run a bill to let the government buy land to put a post office, and they might not buy it. So we give them the right to use eminent domain, because it is in the public interest, the public good, to have a post office or a government funded or supported hospital. A lot of those things. That's in our best interest. So we allowed that. But we changed that to just simply restrict eminent domain for military training purposes. Then later I passed a law that said that no state land, because there's 2 sections in every township dedicated to state, which is called the state school lands, and they can't use those for military training purposes. That's only as good as that law stands.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think people get way too invested in the national politics, because that's what the media drives every day. But you can make real change fairly quickly at the local and state level if you get involved.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the laws that typically affect you far more directly than anything at the national level. If you can get good people in at the state and local level and pass good laws or repeal stupid laws at the state and local level, there's only so much you can do on the national level. But the stuff that affects you directly is state, local, county, and if you put good people in there, you repeal bad laws, put in good laws. It makes your life a lot more livable. Just ask people in California how state and local laws affect them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I guess on that note, I would suggest is it still District 64 that Dean's running for?
Yes, District 64, Colorado House District 64. We have a very good guy running on state representative, and you're well acquainted with him. Small buddy Dean Ormiston. Dean is running
Dean
for
Ormiston.
Yes, he's running for state representative, Colorado House District 64, on the Democrat ticket. But even though Dean looks a little wild, as you know, he's even more calm than I am, and not quite as quick to fire, and very capable of standing up for what he says and what he believes, highly educated, really supportive. And that's coming up pretty quick. See, the ballots went out tonight. And so he's up for election of District 64. So anybody in District 64, look at that carefully.
Very, very, very carefully, and we'll have Dean on here in the next day or two. I just got to get a hold of him, and we'll go over his whole platform and everything. And it's a win for common people when you get a cowboy in a Capitol building. It really is.
Well, yeah, Dean's not. He's a little younger than I am, not much, but. For sure he's not looking for a long career in politics. He's the one to
he's
and
definitely
that's
not.
It.
Yeah, and that's the kind of people you want, making decisions for you, because they're going to make decisions that are going to affect them down the road, and that's the kind of representative you're supposed to have. Somebody that doesn't really want to be up there, but they just want to do what's right for their district.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, Wes, it's been a good time, and we'll do it again here soon. I enjoyed it.
All right, man. Right easy. Keep your cinch tight. It's your whiskey bottle with a little whiskey in your water jug full. I'll be in touch. Thanks.
All right. We'll see you later.
All right.